Not a duchess, but a thief. That's the line that started everything. A whisper, a rumor, a spark tossed into a room already soaked in gasoline. And in this fictional universe, where public image is a carefully crafted illusion and celebrity chefs rule their kitchens like monarchs, that one explosive accusation sent shockwaves through every corner of the entertainment world. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. But let's pause for a moment. Ask yourself something. What would you do if someone you once trusted, someone you even cared for, took the one thing you poured your soul into and presented it to the world as if it were theirs? Really think about it, because that's the emotional center of this story, this fictionalized drama, this unfolding scandal that, in our alternate world, lands at the doorstep of Meghan, not the real Meghan, but a fictional persona used for storytelling. Just days before the premiere of her highly anticipated holiday cooking special, the show's title sounds soft, sweet, cozy. With love, Meghan, holiday celebration. A perfectly packaged, cinnamon-scented, cocoa-dusted Christmas special arriving on December 3rd. But behind the frosted sugar coating, behind the twinkling lights and the perfectly iced gingerbread cookies, something darker brews, something stolen. At least, that's what fictional celebrity chef Cory Vitiello claims. Yes. In this fictional universe, Cory, the rising culinary star, the man with the midwinter roast everyone in North America tried recreating last year. The man whose Brussels sprouts went viral after a food critic wrote that tasting them felt like being hugged by Christmas itself. That Cory has allegedly stepped forward with a story he never intended to share. A story he thought he buried. A story he never imagined would return to haunt him, let alone in front of millions waiting to stream a holiday special. But here we are. And before we dive deeper, let me ask you another question. Have you ever noticed how some scandals don't explode immediately? They simmer on low heat, quietly, invisibly, until one day the pot boils over? This is one of those stories. And oddly enough, it didn't start with an argument. It didn't start with jealousy. It didn't even start with fame. It started in a kitchen, a small one actually, one that smelled of rosemary, sea salt, and fresh dough. The kind of kitchen where laughter mixes with the sound of sizzling pans, where someone hums along to a song playing from a cracked speaker, where people accidentally bump into each other and apologize, smiling, because in a kitchen, you're a team. That's where our fictional versions of Cory and Meghan first crossed paths. Back then, she wasn't a global name. She wasn't a duchess in this dramatized world. She wasn't a household figure fronting multi-million-dollar deals. She was a storyteller. A lifestyle blogger, someone who loved beautiful things and loved sharing them even more. And that's where everything gets complicated. Because in this fictionalized storyline, Cory didn't see danger in the way she watched him cook. He didn't read into the way she asked questions. He didn't think twice when she leaned in a little too closely as he whisked a sauce, her eyes scanning each movement as though she were imprinting it into memory. Most people would consider it flattering. Cory did too, at first. But now, as he breaks his silence, he claims those moments weren't admiration. They were reconnaissance. Remind yourself, this is a fictionalized plot, a dramatized expose. A world where characters stretch beyond reality, where conflicts escalate, where every emotion is amplified to keep you on the edge of your seat. Still, the betrayal, fictional as it is, feels painfully real. Think about this. What if someone asked you for a recipe, tasted it, loved it, praised it, then wrote it down when you weren't looking? Or worse, what if they asked for one recipe, but took 4, 5, 6? And what if, years later, those recipes, the ones you perfected, safeguarded, maybe even dreamed about, appeared on the global stage under someone else's name? That's the gut punch of our story. Because just as the fictional world's media gears up to celebrate Meghan's holiday debut, just as glossy magazines prepare to run features on her newfound culinary brilliance, Cory decides he can't stay quiet anymore. Why now? Why speak? Why step forward days before the premiere? Is it pettiness? Revenge? Desperation? Or is there something deeper, a moment, a discovery, a piece of evidence that forced his hand? Those questions are the heartbeat of the introduction you're reading right now. And trust me, they're only the beginning. Because this story, in our fictional expose universe, doesn't unfold in a straight line. It twists. It loops. It ricochets between past and present, between truth and perception, between creation and credit. And if you think you already know where it's heading, ask yourself this. What if the secret isn't the recipes she allegedly took, but the one she didn't? What if the real scandal isn't that a dish was copied, but why it was copied? What if the holiday special is hiding more than sugar cookies and sentimental soundtracks? You'll get those answers, but not yet. Right now, we need to set the emotional foundation. We need to understand why Cory never spoke before. Why his silence lasted this long. Why it cracked now, at this moment, with the world's attention drifting toward the holiday show. Let's go back again. To the kitchen. To the beginning. According to this fictionalized version of Cory, the first time he felt something was wrong was almost forgettable, at least at first. He had finished plating a winter herb chicken dish, the kind of recipe he spent years refining. The glaze. The temperature. The resting time. The brush of thyme oil at the end. Meghan, fictional Meghan, tasted it and froze. Not in a bad way. Not in shock. But in calculation. Cory didn't understand it then. But he remembers it now. Her expression wasn't, "This is delicious." It was, "This is usable." Have you ever seen that look in someone's eyes? The moment wonder shifts to intention. It's subtle, almost invisible. But if you catch it, it stays with you. And that look is what Cory claims he saw, the first ripple in what would later become a tidal wave. But here's where the contradiction comes in. For months, nothing happened. No tension, no accusations, no missing recipes, nothing that could be pointed to as a sign. Which raises the question again. If this was really happening, why didn't anyone notice? If she was really copying dishes, why were there no red flags? Unless, of course, the process was slower. Careful, like tracing a drawing first, before painting your own version of it. Like learning a melody, before changing the lyrics. Months passed. Seasons changed. Their paths diverged. Cory moved on. Meghan moved up. The world kept spinning. Until the trailer dropped. A 2-minute teaser. Full of warm lighting, holiday lights, cookies, cinnamon sticks, mugs of cider, and classic Christmas music playing softly in the background. And then, 4 seconds in, the dish appeared. Cory's fictional signature dish. Or at least, something that looked exactly like it. Too exact. Too familiar. Too identical. Imagine the feeling. Seeing something that represents your craft, your identity, displayed in front of millions, but with someone else smiling next to it. That moment wasn't dramatic for drama's sake. It was the spark. The moment everything snapped into place. The moment past memories took on new meaning. And that's when Cory, in our fictional universe, decided to break his silence. This is where our story truly begins. Not in the kitchen years ago. Not when she took notes or copied ingredients. It begins here. With recognition. With realization. With the sudden flood of every moment he ignored. And that's the emotional hook pulling you into this narrative. Because this isn't just about food. It's not just about recipes. It's about trust, credit, identity, creation. Because losing a relationship hurts. But losing your work, losing your art, cuts deeper. And now, in this fictional world, Cory prepares to speak publicly, knowing the storm it could unleash. But here's the twist you're not ready for. Cory's fictional version didn't speak up because of what he saw in the trailer. He spoke up because of what someone sent him afterward. A message. Short, cold, explosive. A message that connected the past to the present and revealed a secret he never expected to uncover. We'll get to that soon. But before we do, we need to dig into the little details. The moments that didn't make sense before. The conversations that felt innocent at the time. The small questions, the photos taken at odd angles, the notes that appeared in her journal. Because only when we go back, carefully, piece by piece, can we understand how this fictional scandal was built. And only then will the truth, the real fictional truth, begin to untangle itself. But before we unfold those layers, before we explore the missing recipes and the sous chef who saw too much, before we examine the notebook that started all the whispers, we need to pause. Because the next detail, the one you'll hear in Chapter 1, is where this fictional story stops simmering and starts boiling over. And trust me, what comes next will change everything. Have you ever had one of those moments where something feels wrong, but you can't explain why? A moment that seems so small, so harmless, that you convince yourself it's nothing. only to discover later it was the beginning of everything? That's how Cory Vitiello, our fictional chef at the center of this unfolding storm, remembers the day his recipe book first crossed paths with Meghan, the fictionalized persona in our dramatized world. He didn't know it then, but looking back, he says it was the day he should have paid attention. Let's take you to that moment. Because if you want to understand why this fictional scandal shook him to his core, why he now claims his recipes were lifted right under his nose, you need to see how it began. Not with fire, not with shouting, not with anger, but with a question. Do you always write everything down? Harmless, right? Simple, soft, almost curious. But in hindsight, in the emotional rewind of his memory, Cory says something about her tone felt probing. At the time, though, he just smiled. Because in a kitchen, questions are normal. People ask why you add rosemary at the end instead of the beginning. Why the butter needs to be cold. Why browning onions takes 15 minutes when it looks done already. But Meghan, fictional Meghan, wasn't asking about technique. She was asking about the book, the notebook, that plain, dark brown leather-bound journal sitting on the corner of Cory's station like a quiet guardian. Only now, as he reflects in this fictional narrative, does he realize that was the moment everything shifted. Just slightly, like the soft click of a lock turning that no one hears until it's too late. In this dramatized world, Cory's notebook wasn't just paper. It wasn't just ink. It was his craft, his process, his heart on a page. Not every chef uses one, but Cory always did. He wasn't the type who scribbled recipes onto random napkins or the back of grocery receipts. He respected structure. He believed in documenting every discovery, every accident that turned into brilliance. Because creativity can't always be trusted to memory, but ink doesn't forget. Inside that journal were 4 years' worth of holiday recipes. The perfect December roast. The winter herb blend that gave his chicken its signature aroma. The cider glaze that made customers close their eyes in disbelief. And the Brussels sprouts dish people joked must have been touched by angels. Because who enjoys Brussels sprouts? It was all there. Organized. Precise. Protected. At least, that's what Cory believed. Now imagine this scene. Steam rising from a pot. Pots clanging softly in the background. The smell of roasted garlic and thyme lingering in the air. Cory plating a dish with the quiet confidence of someone who has done this 1,000 times. And Meghan, fictional Meghan, walking in with a smile that looked casual, but eyes that were anything but. You keep everything in there? She asked, nodding toward the journal. Pretty much, he replied, barely looking up. Chefs have muscle memory. They can plate blindfolded. He didn't think much of it. What's in it? She pressed. Recipes. Ideas. Ratios. Experiments that failed spectacularly. Experiments that succeeded beyond belief. But Cory didn't explain any of that. He kept it simple. Everything I don't want to forget, he said. He didn't realize that answer gave her everything she needed. Let's pause here. Ask yourself this. Why would someone who isn't a chef be so interested in another person's recipe journal? Curiosity? Admiration? Inspiration? Or something else? Have you ever watched someone watching you? Not casually, but intensely? Like they're taking mental notes, but trying not to look like they are? That's how Cory describes her gaze in hindsight. At the time, though, in the moment, he misread it completely. He thought she admired him. And why wouldn't he? He was at the top of his fictional culinary scene. He had opened new restaurants. His holiday dishes were becoming legends. Food critics were calling him the man rewriting winter cuisine. Admiration comes with the territory. What he didn't know, what he never imagined, was that admiration, in the wrong hands, can turn into opportunity. Let's move forward in time. The kitchen was closing. Staff was cleaning up. Pans were soaking in deep sinks. The floor was being mopped. That end-of-night quiet was settling in, like a sigh after a long day. Most nights, Cory kept his journal in the same place, tucked beneath a cutting board, protected from spills and wandering eyes. But on this night, he left it on the prep table. He still doesn't remember why. Maybe he was distracted. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was thinking about the new roasted pear dessert he had been testing. But whatever the reason, the journal sat alone, exposed, visible. Meghan saw it. She walked by slowly, paused, tilted her head. Can I look? She asked. A normal person might hesitate, might guard, might say no. But Cory trusted her. At least in this fictional narrative, he did. Sure, he said. 2 letters. 1 moment. A decision he didn't realize he would spend years regretting in our fictional timeline. She opened the book carefully. Not with a quick flip. Not with random page skimming. But with intention. She turned each page like it was a delicate artifact. He remembers the way she smiled faintly as she read. The way her fingertip traced a line of his handwriting. The way her breathing changed slightly when she reached a holiday section. Wow, she whispered. This is beautiful. Compliment? Yes. But compliments can be weapons too. Ask yourself this. Have you ever given someone access to a part of you and later wished you hadn't? That's what this moment was for Cory. But he didn't know yet. He wouldn't realize for years. What he did notice, barely, was that she lingered longer on certain pages. Especially the holiday ones. The ones he spent the most time perfecting. The ones that made seasonal dining critics lose their minds. The ones he planned to use for his own future show someday. But here's the detail that truly haunts him in this fictional world. When she handed the notebook back, she said something strange. Something he brushed aside then, but can't forget now. You could build an empire with this, she said softly. Not, these recipes are incredible. Not, your cooking is amazing. Not, this is impressive. You could build an empire with this. Who says that? A chef? No. A foodie? No. A casual admirer? No. Someone thinking bigger. Someone imagining potential. Someone already picturing ways to use it. But Cory didn't hear the warning in her voice. Not then. He laughed, shrugged, closed the notebook, slipped it back under the cutting board. And that's when he noticed her eyes again. Focused. Almost hungry. Not for food, but for something else. Some people say inspiration starts with curiosity. Others say ambition starts with opportunity. But in the fictional world of this exposé, something else started that night. Something that would follow him for years without him knowing. Something that would lie dormant until the holiday special trailer dropped. Something that would erupt into scandal when the world least expected it. And you know what the first sign was? Not a missing dish. Not a strange question. Not a copied recipe. It was a compliment. A simple one. Delivered with a smile. You have no idea how valuable this is. In the moment, Cory took it as praise. But looking back, he says it felt like a premonition. Because after that night, things changed subtly. Very subtly. Not enough to raise alarms. Not enough to notice. Just enough to matter. Over the next few weeks, Meghan asked more questions. Not the standard curious questions. Not the casual ones. But specific ones. What temperature do you roast at? How long do you reduce the cider? Why do you add the herbs after resting, not before? What's the exact ratio for the spice blend? She asked about ratios a lot. Funny, isn't it? Ratios are the fingerprint of a chef. You can imitate flavors. You can mimic plating. But ratios, the exact balance, that's the soul of the dish. And Cory didn't guard those ratios. He shared them openly. Because she wasn't a competitor. She wasn't a chef. She wasn't someone he imagined would ever stand behind a stove professionally. She was just Meghan. Charming, curious, creative, and harmless, at least in his eyes. Until the day something seemingly insignificant happened. Cory left the kitchen to take a call. Just a minute. Maybe 2. When he returned, her posture had shifted. She was sitting at his station. The notebook was open. And she was holding her phone at a downward angle. Not texting. Not checking something. Photographing. She jumped slightly when he walked in. Not enough for him to catch fully. Just enough for him to sense something. But her smile was quick. Smooth. Effortless. Oh, sorry, she said. I just wanted to remember your handwriting. It's so artistic. That explanation made no sense. No one photographs handwriting for artistry. Not like that. But Cory, trusting, brushed it off. He assumed the best. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? He didn't know that some people photograph details not to remember, but to replicate. That moment, that single, tiny, forgettable moment, would later become the center of everything. Because months later, when the fictional Netflix trailer dropped, when the holiday dish appeared, when the world gasped, when Cory's heart sank, he remembered that moment. The angle of her phone, the page she was looking at, the dish she photographed. And that was the moment he realized, in this fictional universe, that the betrayal didn't start with a recipe. It started with access. Access he gave willingly. Access he never thought would be used against him. Access that would come back in the most unexpected way. Because the dish she photographed? The exact page she was viewing? It wasn't just any recipe. It was the one he never shared publicly. The dish people begged him to reveal every December. The one critics said could win a war on its own. The recipe that became the centerpiece of his culinary identity. And that dish, that recipe, that signature creation, would later appear on her fictional holiday show. But that reveal comes later. For now, all you need to know is this. The notebook was the beginning. The end wouldn't arrive for years. And everything in between, every moment, every detail, every hint, was building toward a truth that would shatter the peace of the fictional culinary world. Because what happened next? What Cory discovered later? What he never expected to uncover? That's the part of the story that changes everything. And no one, not even Cory, saw it coming. Have you ever created something so personal, so perfect, that it feels like part of your soul lives inside it? For Cory Vitiello, our fictional chef, those dishes weren't just food. They were memory, passion, identity. And in this dramatized universe, they were the exact things that fictional Meghan allegedly couldn't resist. Let's start with the obvious. Not every recipe is worth copying. Not every dish has the power to spark envy, admiration, or obsession. But Cory's? Each one was a masterpiece. Take, for instance, his winter herb roast chicken. The herbs weren't chosen randomly. Each sprig of rosemary, thyme, and marjoram was measured to the milligram. Too much rosemary, it overpowered. Too little thyme, it fell flat. The glaze was a mixture of cider reduction, honey, and just a whisper of orange zest, balanced so perfectly that tasting it felt like the first snowfall of December, crisp, surprising, and comforting all at once. And his side dishes? Legendary. The Brussels sprouts with caramelized shallots and smoked almonds weren't just vegetables. They were a performance. A dramatic crescendo in the symphony of a holiday meal. People talked about them like they were magic. And the truth? Cory liked it that way. He loved knowing people remembered his creations. But now imagine, in this fictionalized world, that someone walks into your kitchen, smiles, and suddenly those dishes belong to them. Not in spirit, not in homage, but in practice. Recreated, filmed, and broadcast worldwide. Let's pause for a moment. Ask yourself, how would that feel? Because Cory's fictional version says the feeling is indescribable. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. All rolled into a strange, heavy knot that sits in your chest. And yet, when it happened, no one noticed. Not immediately, because at first, it wasn't obvious. Meghan's questions were subtle. Her interest seemed innocent, maybe even complimentary. Could you teach me how you balance the herbs? She asked, notebook open. Your ratios are so precise, I wouldn't want to get them wrong. Simple, honest, respectful, or so it appeared. But Cory's memory, the one he recounts in this fictional exposé, tells a different story. It wasn't just a question. It was a rehearsal, a study session, a mapping of his genius. Then there was the chocolate peppermint tart. In this fictional world, Cory's version had taken him years to perfect. The crust was buttery, crisp, and slightly salty. The ganache was bittersweet, silky, and perfectly tempered. The peppermint topping? Fresh leaves, not extract, lightly bruised to release the aroma. It wasn't just dessert. It was an experience. And yes, fictional Meghan allegedly took note of that as well. She watched him assemble it, photographed it, lingered near the counter, pretending to observe for fun, while mentally cataloging each step. Cory, trusting as ever, believed she admired his craftsmanship. Until the trailer came out, revealing the same dessert, plated almost identically, complete with a sprinkling of the same crushed peppermint leaves. Did you catch that? Not inspired by, not a twist on, almost exactly the same. That's when Cory realized, in this fictionalized narrative, that admiration can become appropriation. And it wasn't just desserts. It was every dish that made him unique. His signature winter soups, the mulled cider reduction, even the golden roasted potatoes with thyme and garlic, allegedly copied. Every item carefully curated for taste, texture, and presentation. Every item with a story he had told no one outside the kitchen. But here's the most astonishing part of Cory's fictional account. He noticed the patterns early, but he ignored them. Because he thought, she wouldn't. She can't. She doesn't know enough. Oh, how wrong he was. Over time, fictional Meghan allegedly refined the recipes she observed. Adjusted a spice here, reduced a glaze there, but never straying far from the source. Each dish, polished and perfected for the camera, ready for millions of viewers. And Cory? He kept seeing shadows of his dishes everywhere. Menus inspired by his signature items in magazines. Food blogs calling out holiday delights you can recreate at home. Recipes suspiciously similar to his own. And yet, the clincher, the proof he claims finally pushed him over the edge, was subtle but undeniable. The plating. Cory's fictional dishes weren't just about taste. They were art. He had a specific way of presenting each item. A tilt of the garnish, a swoosh of sauce, a sprinkling of nut dust precisely measured. A signature, a fingerprint. And when he saw it on the trailer for her fictional holiday show, he recognized it instantly. That exact tilt, that swoosh, that sprinkling. Not inspired, not similar, identical. Let's pause again. Think about it. How often do you see someone's signature style copied so precisely that even the tiniest details match? It's not flattery, it's replication. The line between admiration and theft blurred, or so Cory claims in this dramatized expose. And then there's the emotional layer. Because it's not just the recipes, it's the relationship. Trust once placed, allegedly violated. Cory says he never imagined the person he considered a friend, a creative partner in spirit, could turn so meticulously into a competitor, a mimic. Ask yourself, would you confront them immediately? Or would you wait, hoping it's coincidence? Cory's fictional narrative is filled with that tension. The sleepless nights, the replaying of conversations in his mind, the haunting realization, every compliment, every "could I see how you do that?" might have been a calculated move. And it wasn't just the food. It was the show itself. The concept, the format, the angles of the camera, allegedly mirroring Cory's own vision. All of it presented as original, all of it under her name. Some would call it coincidence. Some would call it inspiration. But Cory, in this fictional world, calls it theft. He even tells a story about the winter salad with roasted chestnuts, candied cranberries, and spiced vinaigrette. The dish was one of his proudest creations. In the trailer, he claims he saw her holding a plate of the exact salad, mimicking the garnishing he always did. He remembers the moment like a punch to the gut. A dish that took him months to perfect. Recreated, photographed, broadcast, and celebrated. Allegedly without his consent or acknowledgement. And the desserts weren't safe either. Chocolate bark, sprinkled with candied orange peel and pistachios, arranged in a specific geometric pattern that Cory alone had devised. Recreated in miniature for camera shots. The exact angles. The exact placement. Even the candy sprinkles lined up the same way. At that moment, he says, his fictional anger morphed into disbelief. Then into resolve. But before he could act, he hesitated. Why? Because it was her. Because she was charming. Because the world was about to fall in love with her holiday special. Because confronting her could make him look petty. Because, in his mind, the evidence wasn't public yet. Months passed, and the dishes continued to appear. Mentions in blogs. Mentions in magazines. The trailer. Teasers. Every appearance further validating the realization that his signature creations, his emotional labor, had allegedly become hers. And that's when Cory allegedly discovered the most shocking detail, the one that pushed him from disbelief to action. It wasn't a missing recipe. It wasn't even the recreated dishes. It was an email, a forwarded draft from someone in the fictional Netflix production team. A casual message, a line casually typed that mentioned the original recipe inspiration. And who was mentioned as the originator? Cory. In that instant, everything snapped into focus. Not inspiration, not homage. Replication. Acknowledgement buried in a footnote no one would read. And that's when he decided, in this dramatized universe, that silence was no longer an option. The world had to know. But even then, he was cautious. He knew accusations, even in fiction, carry consequences. He knew the media loves scandal more than truth. He knew the story had to be precise, irrefutable, and undeniable. And yet, the anger simmered. The betrayal festered. And with the premiere approaching on December 3, fictional Cory felt the clock ticking. Ask yourself, if your creative labor, your most personal work, was about to premiere under someone else's name, what would you do? Exactly. That's where the tension of this fictionalized expose truly begins. And here's the cliffhanger to end this chapter. Because Cory's fictional notebook, his supposedly private sanctuary of culinary genius, wasn't the only thing that had been exposed. There was another secret, a page that never left the kitchen. Until now. And it was about to surface in a way that would shock everyone, including Cory himself. It started like any ordinary evening in Cory Vitiello's fictional kitchen. The hum of the exhaust fans, the scent of roasted chestnuts mingling with warm spices, the soft chatter of staff finishing prep, a quiet familiarity, almost comforting. He had been plating a special dessert, a chocolate peppermint tart with a delicate drizzle of white chocolate, garnished with mint leaves pressed just so. Every movement was deliberate, every angle measured, every detail accounted for. And yet, in that moment, something felt off. Have you ever experienced that sudden, prickly sensation, like the hairs on the back of your neck standing up, that warns you something isn't right, even though everything looks normal? That's what fictional Cory remembers. He looked up from his plating, expecting to see the usual staff finishing their tasks. But she was there, fictional Meghan. Not walking casually this time, not leaning with curiosity. No, this time, she was standing, observing, her eyes scanning every movement, every detail, almost predatory in her attention. Watching closely, Cory asked, a casual tone masking the creeping unease. "Oh, just trying to learn," she said, her voice soft, almost conspiratorial. But in his gut, something tightened, something that whispered, "This is different." And then he noticed it, the way her notebook rested open on the counter. Not the casual flip-through anymore, not the occasional note. Pages carefully marked, highlighted, photographed. Annotations, scribbles, numbers, meticulous attention to every ingredient, every ratio, every step. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't curiosity. It was preparation. Cory, in the fictional narrative, froze. For the first time, he truly felt the weight of what he had ignored for months. The chocolate peppermint tart he had just finished plating, the centerpiece of his holiday dessert lineup, was the exact same dish that she had taken notes on previously. Exact measurements, exact drizzle patterns, exact garnish placement. And in that moment, something shifted. An emotional spike surged through him. Not anger yet, not betrayal yet. A raw, visceral recognition. This wasn't casual anymore. This wasn't playful admiration. This was appropriation in its most deliberate, meticulous form. Have you ever realized something too late? That split second when your mind connects the dots, and the image of what seemed harmless becomes something else entirely? Cory's realization came in layers. First, there was disbelief. He told himself, "No, it can't be. She's not capable of this. She's curious. She's interested. Yes, but this seems like a stretch." Then, denial. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it's just coincidence. Maybe someone else inspired the plating. Maybe she's just imitating general techniques. And then the gnawing doubt. The small, undeniable evidence creeping through the cracks. She remembered ratios that were never public. She replicated a dessert plating style unique to him. She noted the subtle tricks he'd only taught a handful of trusted staff. It was all too precise to be chance. And yet, in the fictional universe, he hesitated. Why confront her? Why accuse someone who had access, charm, and influence? The stakes were high. The kitchen world is political. And more importantly, this wasn't just about recipes. It was about identity. Cory's creations weren't just dishes. They were reflections of his journey, of his discipline, of his late nights testing glazes, tweaking ratios, perfecting textures. Each dish held a story, a memory, a piece of his life that no one else could replicate. Until now, he watched her carefully, trying to find a sign, anything that would absolve her actions in his mind. But the way she lingered over the notebook, the angle of her phone camera as she photographed the notes, the subtle underlining of ingredients, it all screamed intention. And then, the final trigger came from an unexpected source. And in turn, someone new to the fictional kitchen pulled Cory aside. "You're not going to believe this," the intern whispered, eyes wide. "What?" Cory asked, heart racing. They're copying your plating. The desserts. Every single one. I mean, it's almost identical. You need to see the photos." Cory's mind raced. Photos. Documentation. Proof. He remembered the nights spent experimenting. The tasting panels. The minor tweaks that made a dish uniquely his. and now, captured in digital images, meticulously documented, were replicas of his work, allegedly presented as someone else's creation. Have you ever had that sinking feeling? That gut punch when you realize your trust, your care, your labor might have been exploited? That was Cory in this fictional expose universe. He felt a mix of disbelief and rage, shock and betrayal, confusion and grief. And yet, in that same moment, something else emerged, resolve. Because what he saw wasn't just a copied dish. It was a pattern, a plan, a methodical reconstruction of his work, disguised as inspiration. And that's when Cory, in our dramatized timeline, decided he could no longer ignore it. He needed to document. He needed evidence. He needed to understand the scope before the world saw it. He asked the intern to send everything. Photos, notes, messages. Every scrap of documentation that might validate the creeping suspicion he had tried to ignore for so long. Then came the emotional layer. Because in this fictional universe, Cory didn't just feel betrayed by a peer. He felt personal betrayal. A friend, a confidant, someone he had trusted. The duality of the moment hit him hard. Admiration turned into manipulation. Access turned into appropriation. Trust turned into exploitation. And yet, here's the irony. He couldn't hate her entirely. Not yet. Because in this dramatized world, she was brilliant, ingenious, creative, and all the things that made admiration easy were the same things that made betrayal sting so sharply. And then it hit him, the tipping point. The realization that pushed disbelief into action. The dish she had photographed. His chocolate peppermint tart. The plating. The ratios. All of it. It was not just replicated. It was broadcast. Coming soon to millions of viewers who would assume it was hers. And suddenly, the stakes became crystal clear. The holiday special. The trailer. The premiere on December 3rd. All of it. All his work. Allegedly being claimed, performed, and celebrated under someone else's name. That's when fictional Cory understood something fundamental. This wasn't about food anymore. It was about identity, credit, recognition. And if he didn't act, he would lose both. Ask yourself this. What would you do if the thing you loved, the thing that defined your career, your reputation, your passion, was being presented to the world as someone else's? Exactly. Cory's fictional realization was compounded by another factor. The timing. The trailer had dropped, showcasing these recreated dishes. The world's attention was about to focus on her holiday special. Every day closer to the premiere increased the risk that his work would be normalized under her brand. He couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't rationalize it away. He couldn't assume it was inspiration. It had to be addressed, documented, exposed. But how? This is where the narrative tension peaks in this chapter. Cory knew he had a challenge ahead, proving that his signature dishes, his creations, his identity, were allegedly appropriated in a world where influence and charm can mask originality. And he also knew the clock was ticking, because in this fictional universe, the premiere would change everything. What would come next? What would Cory do with the evidence? How far would he go to protect his creative identity? And most importantly, what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever had a moment where a single message, a simple line of text, changes everything you thought you knew? One email, innocuous in appearance, suddenly revealing a hidden world of intention, strategy, and perhaps betrayal? In the fictional universe we've created, Cory Vitiello's realization of what was happening didn't begin with a confrontation. It began with an email, one he almost didn't see. one that had been deleted, only to resurface in the most dramatic way possible. Let's rewind slightly. The trailer had aired. The teaser clips of her holiday special, fictional Meghan's show, had emerged online. Every frame showcased dishes that seemed hauntingly familiar. Dishes Cory had poured hours, weeks, and years into perfecting. Dishes whose recipes had been painstakingly refined in his private kitchen notebook. At first, he told himself it was coincidence. He even tried to rationalize it. Creative minds often think alike, right? Recipes are inspired by trends, by seasons, by flavors that naturally complement each other. But then the email arrived. Or, rather, the email that was supposed to arrive and didn't. In this fictional narrative, the email came from someone within the production team, a junior coordinator who had been working closely on the holiday special. The subject line was innocent enough: holiday menu drafts. It was meant to contain forwarded drafts of the dishes for approval, adjustments, or notes on the shoot schedule. But when Cory opened it, he discovered something unusual. The attachments were missing. The images weren't there. The text had been edited, deleted, gone. And yet, the metadata, the digital fingerprints, told a story he couldn't ignore. The email had originally contained scans of his own recipe pages. Every ratio, every garnish placement, every subtle annotation. All supposedly for internal production notes. All originating from the person who had been observing him in the kitchen. And the kicker? The forwarded draft contained a single, almost casual line, buried at the bottom. Original recipe inspiration, Cory Vitiello. At first glance, it might appear as a nod of respect, a polite acknowledgement in the small print, a line no one would read. But in the fictional world we're exploring, Cory recognized it for what it truly was. A tiny breadcrumb of proof buried beneath layers of oversight. A clue left behind. A whisper of accountability. But here's where it gets worse. Someone deleted it. The attachments vanished. The original email was scrubbed from the system, seemingly at random. Ask yourself this. What would you do if you found proof of someone appropriating your work, only to have the evidence erased before your eyes? That was Cory's fictional nightmare. The mixture of rage, disbelief, and helplessness was almost unbearable. And yet, it was the catalyst he needed. He began piecing things together. Who had access to the drafts? Who had forwarded them? Why was the acknowledgement included in such a subtle, almost dismissive way? Each question led to another. Each detail seemed insignificant, until connected with the larger picture. And as Cory dug, he realized something chilling. The email's deletion wasn't accidental. Someone didn't want this evidence to be seen. Someone had deliberately removed it to prevent scrutiny. Which begged the next, more alarming question. How far had the fictional Meghan allegedly gone to cover her tracks? Because if the email had been scrubbed, and if dishes were appearing on a show under her name, then this wasn't a mistake or coincidence. It was a pattern, a methodical execution. And that realization, that methodical intent, changed everything. It wasn't just that his recipes were allegedly being used. It was that someone had orchestrated the appearance of originality while quietly erasing any trace of provenance. Someone had anticipated scrutiny. Someone had prepared for discovery. Someone had thought ahead. Have you ever felt that kind of sting? The sense that what you trusted, what you considered simple, straightforward, and benign, was actually a complex web of manipulation? That's how fictional Cory describes it. A web designed to extract value from his labor without acknowledgement. And yet, in the midst of this despair, a small, surprising detail emerged. A secondary copy of the email had survived, on a colleague's backup account, forgotten in the clutter of old messages, overlooked, unexamined. And when Cory accessed it, he found the deleted content intact. Attachments, scans of his notebook, digital traces of his handwriting, and most importantly, the acknowledgement line. Proof that his work had been intentionally observed, recorded, and forwarded within the production team. In that moment, he felt a mixture of vindication and dread. Vindication, because the digital breadcrumb confirmed his suspicions. Dread, because it meant the situation was real. The dishes on the show were not merely inspired by his ideas. They were directly traced to his creative work. And as he stared at the recovered email, Cory realized something else. This wasn't just about recipes. It wasn't just about credit. It wasn't just about culinary pride. It was about control. It was about narrative. It was about perception. Because in a world where audiences trust the face on the screen, where charm and fame can override expertise, the true creators often remain invisible, unseen, unrecognized, their labor claimed by those with a platform and an image to protect. And that was the crux of Cory's fictional realization. If he didn't act, the world would believe something that wasn't true. The public would celebrate dishes he had created, presented as if someone else had originated them. And the subtle manipulations, the deleted emails, the photographed notebooks, the copied plating, would remain hidden beneath the glossy surface of holiday cheer. But here's the twist, and the cliffhanger that drives the tension forward. As Cory began documenting everything, as he cross-referenced the trailer clips with his notebooks and reconstructed timelines, he discovered an anomaly. One page in his notebook, the page he remembered as a private experiment, was missing, not photographed, not copied, not referenced, completely absent. Why? Who removed it? And what could possibly be hidden in that single page that would change the stakes even further? That's the question that propels this fictional exposé forward. Because this deleted email, as damaging as it seemed, was only the first layer, the tip of the iceberg. And what came next? The missing page, the subsequent messages, and the hidden details would take the story to a level no one anticipated. Have you ever been in a room where words were exchanged, yet the real meaning hid behind every sentence? Where every compliment, every claim, every offhand remark carried a weight you couldn't yet measure? For Cory Vitiello. In this fictionalized universe, that room existed, and it was where he realized the depth of what had been happening. It all began when fictional Meghan started pitching her holiday special to Netflix. The show's title, With Love, Meghan, Holiday Celebration. The concept sounded innocent, even heartwarming. Lights twinkling, cookies being iced, warm cocoa steaming from mugs. A holiday experience designed to soothe the soul. But in Cory's eyes, in this fictional narrative, the show was built on a foundation that didn't belong to her. Netflix, in this world, was entranced. They loved her energy, her charisma, her camera presence. She presented herself as a creator, as an originator. And she emphasized originality, carefully crafting every sentence to suggest that every recipe, every plating choice, every flavor pairing was hers. Cory remembers the first meeting vividly. He wasn't present in person, of course. He was still in the kitchen, unaware of the full extent of the planning. But he had friends, former collaborators, and industry insiders who fed him snippets of conversation. And when he heard the lines she used to describe the recipes, his heart sank. "She calls the dishes hers," a production assistant whispered, almost incredulously. "She says everything in the menu is original. Every single dish. Original, original, original." The repetition of the word stung in Cory's fictional memory. Because original implied creation from scratch. It implied ownership. It implied a narrative in which he had no part, despite the fact that the recipes, as he knew them, were his. Let's pause here for a moment. Have you ever been erased from a story that you lived, breathed, and shaped? Where your contribution was undeniable to those who knew the truth, yet publicly it vanished. That's exactly how Cory felt. In this dramatized universe, it wasn't merely about credit. It was about identity. His creations defined him. They represented his craftsmanship, his late nights, his ingenuity. And now, according to insiders, they were being claimed by someone else. But here's where it gets worse. The pitch to Netflix wasn't casual. It wasn't a friendly suggestion or a collaborative brainstorm. She framed it as a complete vision, her own holiday recipes, her own plating techniques, her own seasonal flair. And the network loved it. They bought the concept. They signed the deal. And in the contractual fine print, every recipe, every dish, every creation became property of the show, officially and publicly hers. Now imagine Cory's fictional shock. Not just seeing his work presented as someone else's. Not just realizing that years of creativity were being broadcast under another name. But watching a powerful multi-million-dollar network validate that claim. Approve it. Invest in it. Do you feel the weight of that moment? Because in this fictional exposé, Cory does. Every beat of the story builds tension. Every emotional spike compounds. But let's go deeper. Because what she told Netflix, what insiders claim she said, wasn't just a casual claim of originality. It was a story carefully constructed to reinforce her position. She emphasizes the inspiration came from family traditions, one insider said. But then she layers in her own creativity, implying that the recipes are personal inventions, not adaptations. The brilliance, fictional as it is, lies in the manipulation of perception. Viewers, Netflix executives, even culinary critics would accept it at face value. The narrative is coherent, polished, irresistible. But the truth, Cory would argue, was buried beneath a veneer of charm and storytelling. And in Cory's fictional world, that wasn't the only deception. Because according to insiders, she also claimed to have developed new techniques for certain recipes. Adjustments that were allegedly minor but positioned her as an innovator. For example, the glaze on the winter roast chicken, she claimed to have adjusted the spice ratios herself. Yet, Cory's recollection is vivid. Those ratios were precisely what he had documented in his notebook years earlier. Subtle differences? Perhaps. Originality? Questionable. Ask yourself this. How often do we allow perception to outweigh reality? How often does charisma, presentation, and confidence convince an audience, or even a corporate giant, that work is new, when it is, in fact, borrowed? That's the tension Cory felt, and the tension the audience is meant to feel in this fictional expose. Then there's the emotional twist. Because in this narrative, Cory's frustration isn't simply professional. It's deeply personal. He trusted this person. He shared knowledge openly. He allowed access. And now, those gestures of trust were weaponized. He remembered small moments, casual discussions about flavor profiles, her hovering near the counter during prep, the soft, persistent questions about ratios and plating. At the time, he thought they were harmless, even flattering. In hindsight, he sees them as rehearsals, preparatory steps, the groundwork for an eventual presentation to the world under her name. And the audacity? It wasn't just the claim of originality. It was the timing. She pitched the show just months before the holidays, coinciding perfectly with seasonal interest. Millions of viewers would tune in. Millions would praise her culinary vision. Millions would be unaware of the work that went into creating these dishes. The irony, Cory notes in our fictional expose, is brutal. She curated the narrative, packaged the content, rehearsed the dishes, and framed it as personal innovation, all while his creations formed the backbone. And he, the true originator, remained invisible, uncredited, almost erased. At this point, you might be wondering, why not confront her directly? Why wait until now? Cory's fictional answer is layered. Partly, he didn't want to appear petty. Partly, he hoped for a miscommunication. Perhaps she would acknowledge him privately, and the issue could be resolved quietly. Partly, he was in disbelief. The human mind often refuses to accept a betrayal until the evidence is overwhelming. But when the trailer surfaced, along with insider confirmations, and especially when the deleted email was recovered, the reality became undeniable. This wasn't oversight. It wasn't coincidence. It was deliberate. And that's when Cory knew that action was necessary. Not confrontation alone. Documentation, proof, and preparation for the inevitable fallout once the world saw the premiere. Ask yourself, how would you act if your creative identity, your labor, your genius was being systematically rebranded as someone else's? What lengths would you go to reclaim it? That question defines the emotional core of this chapter, and it sets the stage for the next revelation, the former sous chef who saw everything. Because if the deleted email was the spark, the sous chef's testimony would become the flame. The first eyewitness account. The confirmation that the allegations weren't just digital traces or shadows. They were real, observed, recorded. And just like that, the fictional universe of this expose moves from suspicion to tangible evidence. But here's the cliffhanger. The next chapter reveals what the sous chef saw. The details, the subtle gestures, the unnoticed actions that no one else could confirm. And what he remembered could either exonerate or indict in ways that would shock everyone, including Cory. Every story has witnesses. Even in the most polished, curated narratives, someone is watching. Someone remembers. Someone notices what no one else dares to record. In this fictional expose universe, that witness was Cory Vitiello's former sous chef, a quiet, observant presence in the kitchen who, until now, had remained silent. and what he had witnessed, allegedly, would finally bring clarity to the brewing storm surrounding the holiday special. The sous chef's perspective is crucial because, in the fictional world we're exploring, he saw things as they unfolded naturally, without the lens of fame or ambition clouding his memory. He didn't have a vested interest in claiming ownership, nor did he benefit from silence or revelation. He simply saw what happened, and years later, he decided it was time to speak. Let's set the scene. It was a late afternoon in the winter months. The kitchen was a controlled chaos of clattering pans, sizzling sauces, and the faint scent of cinnamon and nutmeg lingering in the air. Cory was instructing staff on the assembly of a complex dessert, a chocolate peppermint tart with a particular drizzle pattern that had become his signature. He moved like a conductor, orchestrating each station with precision. The sous chef observed quietly from the corner, noting every detail, every subtle adjustment. And then she entered. Fictional Meghan. Casual, cheerful, innocent, or so it appeared. At first, the sous chef didn't notice anything unusual. He had seen visitors before, interns, curious culinary students, even magazine writers. They all asked questions. They all hovered. Nothing new. But soon, he began to notice patterns. The way she asked about ratios, not ingredients. The way she observed plating angles, not just taste. The way she lingered over procedural details, not for curiosity, but for understanding, absorbing, recording. The sous chef watched as she pulled out her notebook. She wrote diligently, page after page, noting measurements, techniques, even small secrets Cory had mentioned in passing. No one else in the kitchen had that access. And in this fictional narrative, the sous chef knew it. Then came the moments that truly set off alarms. She began photographing the dishes while Cory was distracted. Not casual snapshots. Not social media angles. Precise documentation. The kind of images someone would use to replicate every detail. The sous chef leaned closer, curious and uneasy. He whispered to an intern nearby. "Do you see what she's doing?" The intern nodded slowly, eyes wide. It wasn't long before Cory himself noticed the behavior. He laughed it off. "It's okay," he said. "She's just curious." But the sous chef remembered thinking, "No, this isn't just curiosity. There's intention here. Methodical intention." And then the clincher came. The dish he had personally overseen, a winter herb roast chicken, plated in Cory's unique style. Fictional Meghan recreated it. Exactly. Same arrangement. Same glaze. Same garnish pattern. The sous chef froze. He could hardly believe it. Was this really happening? He had never seen such precise replication outside of culinary schools where students are taught to copy chefs as exercises. But this wasn't an exercise. This was a working kitchen, a professional production. And it wasn't just one dish. Over the next several weeks, he observed the same pattern. Chocolate peppermint tarts, Brussels sprouts with caramelized shallots, golden roasted potatoes. Each one noted, photographed, sometimes even tested and tasted for accuracy. The sous chef's unease grew. He began to suspect what Cory hadn't yet realized fully, that the dishes, once private, were being systematically appropriated. Then came the day that changed everything. Cory stepped out briefly to take a call. She approached the counter, opened his notebook, and began making a series of subtle annotations, highlighting, underlining, and even adding her own small notes in the margins. The sous chef whispered to the intern, "This is it. She's mapping everything." And that's when the realization hit him fully. They were not merely observing. They were preparing to present his work as their own. Ask yourself this. What would you do if you saw someone taking years of another person's creativity and arranging it for their own showcase? Would you speak up? Would you intervene? Or would you wait, hoping someone else would notice? The sous chef, in this fictionalized universe, chose observation first, documentation second, and eventually, he decided to remain silent until now. Because speaking out too soon, without corroboration, could have jeopardized his own career. The kitchen is politics. Power is precarious. And in this fictional narrative, the stakes were high. Yet he never forgot what he saw. Every copied ratio, every replicated dish, every calculated glance.